As part of the Growth Catalyst podcast, I will be having a series of conversations with Matt Roberts, who's co-founder of ZOKRI. In this episode, Matt emphasised that no single goal-setting framework is actually best, that the success comes from how well it's implemented, and therefore it's the strategy, not the framework, that drives results. Great strategies are specific and they're built cohesively around a compounding advantage that makes each win more likely. He unpacks that with us. I hope you enjoy. Morning, Matt.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining me. Right, so I'm going to do some quick fire questions. So a question I bet you get asked a lot is, which goal setting framework is best?
I think everybody would assume my answer is OKRs because we implement OKRs across the world, but actually it's not. I'm a great student of all the frameworks, V2MOM, OKR, SMART, to name but a few, and actually they're all incredibly similar. They're all trying to define this future point in time, create some measurable coordinates for telling us whether we got there, and depending on the framework, we might use initiatives or methods or tasks or whatever that might be that help us optimize our path there and speed to make that sort of destination happen. And for me, it's not about necessarily which of those frameworks they use or even hybrids. It's about your ability to implement them in a way that makes a real impact. So rather than obsessing over the framework, can we use this framework really well? Can we invest in that capability and build that capability internally? Can we use the framework consistently across the org, and can we build the kind of other muscles that live around the frameworks that really optimize your ability to really derive value?
Okay, so there's a point in there where a leadership team has to decide what framework they're using, but what traits, what are the sort of components inside of the business that you'd look at to help you decide what framework works for you?
So we wind back from that and you go, okay, what makes a framework performant and deliver the value that you want as a company? And typically what you're actually looking for is not a framework. You're looking for a point of difference in a market that allows you to grow revenue and profit and faster than your competitors, that takes you from me too to having a clear point of difference where future growth, market share is more likely. To achieve that, we have to formulate a strategy. A strategy is a hypothesis on how you're going to win that manifests itself as an explicit set of choices that are often cohesive or should be cohesive. And ideally, they have this idea of embedding a compounding advantage within. Once you have that, your ability to then articulate those choices through a goal, OKRs are a great way of doing that, can then happen. And then it's about communication. If you consider that measurement is integral to any goal framework, it then has a dependency on your ability to build metric maturity. And we often see that this is missing. Your ability to not just describe in words your strategy, but in numbers. How would we be able to observe whether this strategy is working? And that's often not revenue and profit because they're too lagging. It's the leading indicators of the strategy that we could embed into goal form are then really important. So building metric maturity, both strategically and within teams, that allow us to say, are we healthy? Is our strategy on track? Really important. And if you can build strategic maturity, metric maturity, goals can slot in nicely. But even if goals, and they're used really well, are outcome based, have metrics within that, measurements that matter, good targets, etc. You then have to execute, and it's only the doing and the work and the things that we do from week to week that allow us to achieve a goal. And that's where execution is often the problem. So we're really trying to isolate a very few goals with very clear outcomes and dedicate the optimal resources to making progress in the best possible way and the fastest possible way through time. What makes progress happen, because that's actually the only thing that we care about, is our team's ability to really sort of pull themselves back from BAU to really have time to focus, to maximize our productivity, our ability to experiment and create learning loops, be really explicit about those, take calculated risks. These are all the kind of ingredients of making really rapid progress on any goals that you've been able to articulate through a structured process.
Okay. So there's a lot in there to unpack. So even just at the tail end of that, which is the coalface stuff, actually allowing teams to get into the implementation, learn quickly, fail fast, all the rest of it, that takes a certain type of psychological safety inside an organization. So I'm just going to go right the way back up to the strategic bit, which is often, I think, what we often see that's not done particularly well. Can you give us an example of good strategy, bad strategy?
So good strategy is highly specific. It is not a series of generic statements. It is very precise set of choices that you make, that these choices often, if you could imagine them as cogs, are part of a system of choices, one turning the other as opposed to being very separate. And they often have the DNA being that if I make a sale, somewhere in that choice, I'm compounding an advantage. So for example, Apple has its ecosystem where between apps, hardware, music, photographs, in cloud hosting. Actually, I'm locked in. My loyalty's been with Apple for a decade plus. I can't really remove myself easily from that ecosystem. And with every interaction with them, that happens to be a much deeper relationship. But even every customer they add, they learn about what we want, what our preferences are, how we use software. That whole amplification happens. But it also happens with national mid-range companies. So for example, if you're building anything to do with AI right now, you're looking for training data, you're looking to build contextual, highly specific learning sets that allows AI to do certain operations incredibly well. You could argue that your ability to optimize the number of learnings that go into an AI model that allow you to do something really smart is compounding an advantage. If you're doing that relatively quicker than a competitor, you're getting smarter relatively quicker than a competitor. If you have product data around consumers and you know more, that can give you an advantage. But it also sort of falls down to kind of a very much local business. If you're a pizza company sending photos of the pizza coming out of the oven and that gets shared socially, you're compounding an advantage. So that concept works universally everywhere. Market winners have normally found some level of really cohesive strategy with that compounding advantage baked in. We certainly look for it wherever we can. That then is able to set up a conversation about any goal framework.
Okay, that makes sense. So how do you work with your clients on sort of unpacking that strategy? Do they come to you with a strategy already baked, or is that part of the process?
Every company starts from a separate point. Some companies have a well-formed strategy and passes all of the strategic quality tests, and it's about implementation. The gap is an executional problem. Some companies have what they would call a really good strategy, and we get sent the artifacts, and actually it needs sharpening. It can do with some improvement, and we can work with them iteratively in workshops, get teams together, do one-on-ones, be quite challenging where necessary. That can take days and a few weeks, but never months, and that's quite a quick process where we can really start to have the ability to articulate that and get everybody on board. And broad participation is really important there. If you've participated in strategy formulation, your belief in it goes up a lot. And if you believe in something, then you're more resilient, you understand it, you can communicate it. That's really powerful. We rarely get involved in kind of massive multi-month, multi-quarter kind of strategic processes. That's not really what we do. So our sweet spot's probably strategies that need sharpening, and we're very, very good at doing that. Then frameworks like OKRs or whatever framework you've chosen can then be the recipient of that really good strategy. But it's probably worth sort of going down another rabbit hole here. Even having a strategy is one thing. The ability to articulate and communicate it is another. And we undervalue often as companies strategic comms as a discipline. So, I learned a long time ago 2 words, kind of the ability to resonate and influence with people. Did the message get sent, and was it received in the right way? Did I understand it? Can I comprehend it? And is it going to change what I do? And a strategy that works allows our employees to make decisions all the time, big ones, small ones, and they're making it in an aligned way without really thinking, because they completely understand where the company is going, what it's trying to do. So you've got your left brain, right brain thing going on. Our ability to kind of do the mental gymnastics necessary to shape a really good strategy. And then you've got the kind of more creative, softer skills of, can I communicate it? Can I choose the right words, the right mediums? Can I reinforce that message continually? How am I acting around that? And can I really embed our strategic direction into the culture?
So if you're a CEO, a leader of a business, you're probably heading into planning season, you really start to think about what next year looks like. You've potentially given some thought to strategy and you're working with your leadership team. What top tip would you give them now? What quick win? What could they be thinking of now?
Good question. I think the core question that sits at the top of any conversational kind of triage of conversations is what markets do we want to be in? Often companies are spread across too many categories, sectors, niches. So, where are we really strong? Where are we winning deals? Where's our conversion rate really high? Where's our sweet spot? Versus we don't win enough there. We have stronger competitors there. We're not the best at that. How do we then win? How is it once we've chosen our ideal customers or segments or niches? What can we realistically do to make sure that we win? And that really means understanding the customer, the value that they want from us, the value that they will means that they will choose us more often than a competitor. And then building on that, we can then go, well, what capabilities would we need? What do we need to do that's going to allow us to create that kind of that moment with a customer where they say, I'm choosing you, and maybe we can then compound that advantage in the future. So it's a series of logical building blocks, which are actually a series of conversations. There are conversations that you ideally also then want to anchor in logic. And by logic, if I can just say, there's probably 3 or 4 things that we're always looking for, which is, can I articulate what our belief in the capability we need to build is? What is the value of that? Can we estimate the monetary value of making this choice? What's our confidence in that? And one of the kind of weak spots in a lot of teams is they don't try and build high levels of confidence in the belief that they have. It might be that they have spoken to a few customers, the management team believe it's the right direction to go. There are other things that you can do to extend that confidence. There are tests we can do. We can do, qualitative, quantitative research. We can do prototyping, proof of concepts. There are many, many things we can do that would allow us to kind of increase the probability of success by increasing our confidence. And then probably another really good sort of lens to look through is also, what is the strategic fit for this idea? Is it part of this cohesive strategic system, or is this just a standalone idea? And if we can look at all of those ingredients and rationally choose the right choices, you've then got a really strong strategy in waiting. Things that might stop us from doing that: cognitive biases like sunk cost bias, confirmation bias, to name but a few. We are all fallible. We sometimes like to see our ideas win. We often do things for good reasons and bad reasons. Maybe we want to be, very defensive, but our ability to rationally choose the right choices for reasons that make a lot of sense is the essence of what really makes a good team and its ability to do this.
So are there certain questions or types of questions that a CEO could ask of their leadership team to try and help them guide their thinking?
I think it's really, I don't like making strategy more complicated than it is,
Mhm.
but it's really to keep asking them the question. This is about being very customer centric, and it's about how do we win the hearts and minds of that customer to allow them to choose us. It's about being really explicit and really raise the bar on this isn't about being me too. It's about being the one that's chosen. And me too companies tend to have very static or incremental levels of growth. Companies that are chosen are experiencing much higher growth rates. And that in itself, it's not just desirable, because it's obviously more desirable to be growing faster, but it creates this kind of effect that I call an upward spiral, which is if the company's growing faster than everyone else, there are opportunities for employees to grow. They can get, you as an individual can get promoted, your skills and your learning goes up, your ability to hire talent goes up. If you caught yourself in this kind of incremental trap where Me Too is creating, single digit growth, there is nowhere for you to go or your employees to go, and you can't sustain that for many years. So we actually have to, because it's not a choice we have long term, move from me too, not really much better than anyone else, to much better. And that's where strategy again comes in. And again, goal frameworks, just the recipient of that thinking. That the frameworks aren't the strategy. This mental gymnastics ability to communicate are the strategy.
And you've talked about this compounding advantage. Could you just unpack that a little bit more for us?
By strict definition, it's a capability that you've got that makes the next sale or the loyalty of that customer more likely. So for every time I sell something, my confidence in creating a gap between me and competitors goes up, because I have been given something that compounds through time. So if I'm selling the most and I'm getting the most 5-star reviews, my advantage is compounding.
Right, I see.
If I'm gathering more data because I'm selling more and I'm using that data as leverage, my advantage is compounding. There are many forms of compounding advantage, but we're looking to leverage all of the data and all of the actions that we can create with customers, whether they're reviews or testimonials or case studies. We're looking to make the next deal, sale, whatever business you're in, way more likely because of the explicit choice that we've got, and we're calling out what that compounding advantage is in our strategy.
And that's measurable, is it?
Yeah. So if I was to take something that's close to my heart at the moment, if you think about building metrics around your strategy, we are looking to measure the number of learning events that we put into an AI model that would allow it to spot something and do something as a result of observing data in the wild right out there now. So if you want the smartest algorithm or the smartest AI capability, it's a direct correlation with the number of training events you've given it. The measurability part of that is how many times are we training this model? How many new inputs are going into the training set? And that would correlate with the actual capability of the model. So those who train it the fastest have a model that does the most.
And you're constantly building in further compounding advantage with with that. That's
Yeah.
fascinating. Okay. So there's a whole different range and set of data points, like you say, and almost like a tipping point. So if it's reviews, if you're getting more good reviews than the next, then obviously that's creating a tipping point. If you've got a certain set of data that you're constantly sort of drilling down into, that's giving you more learning, therefore more advantage in what you're understanding.
Yes, and always relative to competitors, because none of this is done in a bubble. So you're always in a race.
Yeah. Okay, that's really interesting. And so that sounds like obviously there's a lot of thought, a lot of analytical thought around there, and a lot of experimentation.
Yeah. So most really strong product orientated orgs will have an experimentation mindset. They will be intentionally creating learning loops. They will celebrate failures as much as they celebrate wins, because you're closing down an experiment. They are very comfortable with failure as well as success. And organizations that have that by default have high levels of psychological safety and other high performing team traits, but they also have a very good, strong measurement capability. So they'll be utilizing tools like metrics trees, and other sort of metric maturity sort of development models that allow you to really not just choose the measurements that matter, set really good targets. You have observability of, when if I do this, how would I observe success? These measurements would change, they do or they don't. You complete the learning loop. So really high performing product teams have a lot of these experiments running concurrently, and that's normal. It's more abnormal to not have that, and it would be highly unlikely that you see a really high performing company that doesn't have that muscle embedded in.
So, how are you? I can imagine if you're inside of an organization, perhaps you haven't had the experimentation mindset historically, and that's something that you're, really trying to encourage within this set of leaders. How are you bringing them along for the ride? How are you helping them make that safe?
So if we look at the kind of these planning entities, we talked about strategy. OKRs done well are these kind of, sometimes we call them bets, but these important goals with clear outcomes that are linked to strategy, that we are focusing on, and we have a resource to succeed. There's another interesting and underlying principle: setting goals where you resource them to succeed. And within those goals that have these explicit outcomes, we then are inviting teams as part of the process to say, okay, how are we going to make rapid, continual progress where we're increasing the probability of achieving what we need to achieve? And it's that ability for our teams to be explicit around, I believe that we'd observe success if, we'd stop if this happened, and we think we could test this by doing all kinds of things. They could be fake door tests, A/B tests, prototypes, proof of concepts. There are many ways of testing a belief in a hypothesis that teams, sometimes they can, sometimes they can't. Again, it's a skill we can help teams acquire. It's incredibly valuable, because the worst thing that can happen is you have this belief, and then you do this big long project that involves lots of people, and then you work out that it didn't work, and it's because you didn't actually have the ability to increase confidence in that belief.
Right. Okay. So you've got this team together, and then you're agreeing a set of principles, rules, and timeframes in essence.
Principles, rules, timeframes. No, not really. I don't see it that way. It's not the words I would use. It's a skill and a competency where you can, first of all, acknowledge that we don't have all the answers and not everything we do works, and actually very little is absolutely going to work. So it's you acknowledge the fact that most things that we do are a belief and have a hypothesis attached to it. It's then our ability to, once we've acknowledged that, to go, okay, well, if that's true, how would we observe success? What would we do? What would we do? And then, because you've acknowledged the fact that actually not everything works, it's sometimes a pretty good idea to test it first, without going down the full kind of delivery track of things that we can do. And if you're a product org listening to this and you've got a big engineering team, the most expensive thing we could do is ask you to build something where the value hasn't been validated. So we're always looking to test and build confidence in those beliefs. But it also applies to marketing teams, sales teams, any team within the org. This idea that we make pretty good plans most of the time, but they are mostly founded in a belief that if we do this outcome will happen.
When you're working with clients, is there a moment that you can spot where you can see that there's been a breakthrough, that actually this is landing well and that everybody's on the same mission now, and you can, success or failure? Is there a moment, something that you can sort of tangibly or see?
Yeah, but my favorite thing to do is workshops, because you go from a group of people that turn up in a room, some of them quite cynical. It's another management initiative. It's another strategic event. We've been here before. And as you follow a process, what is palpable is the energy and the belief that enters the system, because what's being talked about and the way it's being talked about is different. And we're starting to have really interesting conversations, and we're still starting to narrow our set of choices down. And the language in the room shifts as well. It is giving people the language like I believe, as opposed to I know. And it's the ability to watch teams start to articulate things in a different way. And over the course of 2-3 days, that room that was cynical moves towards a room that is super energized. And then the challenge is, how do I keep that energy going at the end of that 3 days? And how does that then get communicated to the people that weren't in that room? But it is something that is, goes from a low level to we can do this, and a bit of a rally cry by the end. It's fantastic.
I guess that could be a whole other topic itself. How do you keep up the energy thereafter? And how do you keep momentum going?
And that's, back to the beginning of this conversation, that's where OKRs are great, right? So we can, at the end of that, the actual outcome is we choose a few disproportionately important goals. We have our ability to articulate and communicate them to our teams. We might change them. We don't like to give teams goals. We like them to be involved in them. So there would be an iteration process where, teams have to validate this can be done. This is how we might approach it. This is what we might need to do. And then we use some really simple common sense principles. My favorite is resourcing for success. There is absolutely no point in creating a goal where it can't be achieved, or business as usual is going to really conflict with its achievement. And that's where we also then often have to teach companies how to flex their org structure. It is a common misconception that you set goals according to your organizational chart, and actually the very best goals start with the goal, and then we fit the team around it. And what you normally find if you go goal before org chart is that nearly every goal that really matters requires a cross-functional team to execute it.
Okay, well, I think we're running out of time. I know you're super busy planning a bunch of these workshops at the moment. Is there anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I don't think so. I think, I would hate people listening to this think that this, all of this is stupidly difficult. It's not. A lot of this is very commonsensical and logical, but you have to commit to the implementation. You have to commit to not just reading the book and giving things a try. Mastery of any form of planning, strategic planning, goal setting, execution is something you commit to, and you develop that muscle through time. But also it does require the soft skills. It requires communication. It requires leadership. It requires energy, belief. You've got to remove the detractors. It's got all kinds of complexity to it. But at the heart of all of that, there's a customer. You've got to win them. And this is what we're all about.
Thank you very much.